The Dragon Ball Super manga has been the primary thread keeping fans of the franchise connected to its ongoing story. While the anime has remained dormant since the Tournament of Power arc concluded in 2018, the manga has provided glimpses into what comes next through arcs like Moro, Granola, and the adaptation of the superhero film. But as time has passed, and with no clear announcement regarding the anime's return or the continuation of the manga beyond the last chapter, many fans have grown increasingly anxious. That anxiety was pushed into overdrive when an announcement from the upcoming Japan Expo in Paris surfaced online. According to early translations, Toyotaro is slated to appear at the event alongside his former mentor, Kazuhiko Torishima. The initial post claimed the two would discuss a new original manga. Immediately, this set off alarm bells across the community. If true, this would mean that Toyotaro, the man entrusted with carrying on the Dragon Ball legacy, was stepping away from the franchise to pursue a brand new, unrelated project. In the eyes of many fans, this felt like a betrayal. For a franchise as globally beloved and narratively unfinished as Dragon Ball Super, the idea that its main artist would walk away without resolution was nothing short of disheartening. Social media platforms lit up with confusion, disappointment, and frustration. Videos, tweets, and forum threads began circulating rapidly, some accusing Toyotaro of abandoning the series, others mourning what they believed to be the quiet death of Dragon Ball Super. But as is often the case with international announcements and translations, the truth was far more nuanced and far less dramatic. That initial panic was built on a fundamental misunderstanding. I didn't really want to cover this news, but after a bit of research, I felt like it was necessary, so welcome to the Dragunov Samsara, where we'll cover everything anime, from discussions to lore drops, Q&As, and what-ifs. You'll find all the latest anime and manga news here. We post a video once a week, so consider subscribing if you like the video so you don't miss the next one. The confusion stemmed from a promotional listing published ahead of the Japan Expo 2025 in Paris. The post, which quickly circulated on platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit, described an upcoming panel, featuring both Toyotaro and Torishima, according to the translation being widely shared. The two were set to discuss the creation of a brand new original manga, sparking speculation that this was the beginning of a new non-Dragon Ball project. It didn't take long for the community to react. Content creators began uploading videos mourning the potential end of Toyotaro's involvement with Dragon Ball Super. Fans expressed dismay, not only at the idea of Toyotaro leaving, but also at the timing, especially with the manga seemingly stalled and no anime in sight. The idea of launching a new project while the Dragon Ball narrative remained unresolved felt like a slap in the face to a fan base that's been loyally waiting. But then, the situation took a sharp turn. Shortly after the initial reaction wave, native Japanese speakers and professional translators began to weigh in on the original phrasing. It turned out that the term original manga had been misinterpreted. What the panel was actually referring to was a discussion about Toyotaro's work on Dragon Ball Super, with his mentor Torishima joining to reflect on the creative process and perhaps talk about Toyotaro's journey from fan artist to official mangaka. There was no new manga, no departure, no betrayal. This wasn't Toyotaro announcing a new series. This was simply a case of poor translation leading to mass confusion. The Dragon Ball community had once again found itself swept up in a wave of miscommunication. It's not the first time something like this has happened, and it likely won't be the last. With global events, language barriers, and limited context, things can easily get lost in translation, and in the world of Dragon Ball, where fans cling to every possible update, even a small misstatement can spark wildfire-level reactions. So while the dust began to settle, and the truth came to light, the damage had already been done. Trust was shaken. The hype was deflated. And most importantly, fans were once again reminded of how little official communication we've gotten regarding the future of Dragon Ball Super. And that brings us to the real question. If Toyotaro isn't announcing a new manga, then what is happening at this panel? Once the mistranslation was corrected, the true nature of the upcoming Japan Expo panel became clear. Toyotaro would not be debuting a brand new manga. Instead, he would be participating in a special event centered around his work on Dragon Ball, joined by his former editor and legendary figure in the franchise's history, Kazuhiko Torishima. This clarification was first circulated by Japanese-speaking fans and then confirmed by more reputable sources within the Dragon Ball community. It became evident that the phrase original manga had been interpreted too literally. In reality, the word original was referring to Toyotaro's creative role and input within Dragon Ball Super, not to the announcement of an entirely new, unrelated series. The focus of the panel is expected to revolve around Toyotaro's artistic journey, how he went from drawing DB fan manga to being entrusted with the official continuation of the story. With Torishima at his side, someone instrumental in shaping Toriyama's own career, this panel is shaping up to be more of a celebration of legacy and mentorship than a launch event for new material. Still, this entire incident serves as a stark reminder of just how fragile the line of communication is between the creators of Dragon Ball and its global fanbase. All it took was one poorly translated event description to send shockwaves through the community, exposing just how starved fans are for real, concrete news. It also underscores another hard truth. Official information about Dragon Ball Super has become increasingly rare. With the passing of Akira Toriyama, the silence from Toei Animation, and the uncertain future of the anime, every event and every announcement is treated as a potential turning point. So now that we know what isn't being announced, it's time to turn the conversation toward what could be. While this may not be the explosive reveal some were hoping for, it still might offer a window into the franchise's future. Now that we know Toyotaro isn't debuting a brand new manga, the question becomes, what will this panel reveal? While past Japan Expo appearances have mostly featured art demos and interviews, this year's event carries more weight. Dragon Ball Super manga on hiatus, no new anime in sight, and the loss of Akira Toriyama. Fans are hoping for a signal about what's next. One realistic possibility is a tease for the next Dragon Ball movie. Following the success of Broly and Superhero, a third installment feels inevitable. The panel could reveal concept art, production updates, or even drop a vague release window. There's also the chance we get hints about a new manga arc, perhaps something continuing from the Black Frieza cliffhanger. Even a small comment from Toyotaro or Torishima about where the story is heading could be telling. And while less likely, some fans are holding out hope for a mention of the anime's return, even if it's just a brief acknowledgement that it's still in the works. In the end, this panel might not deliver huge news, but it could still give us valuable insight into where Dragon Ball is heading next. Even though the Dragon Ball Super manga has covered a lot of ground since the end of the anime, there are still several major loose ends that remain unresolved, threads that absolutely need to be addressed before the series can move forward. The most obvious is Black Frieza. Its brief but powerful reappearance at the end of the Granola arc left fans stunned. And with no follow-up since then, it's clear the manga has intentionally set him up as the next big plot point. Being the final villain, or being set up for something else? Check out this video for my opinion. Then, there's the timeline issue between the end of Z and Super. Toriyama confirmed years ago that the events of Dragon Ball Super will eventually connect with the final episode of Z, but so far, that gap remains wide open. With Daima fitting somewhere in that same timeline, things get even more confusing. Daima introduces several elements that contradict what we've seen in Super, like Goku using a Super Saiyan 4-like form, Vegeta tapping into Super Saiyan 3, and Shin and Kibito appearing separated again. These inconsistencies raise serious questions about how all these stories are supposed to fit together. For fans invested in the canon timeline, some kind of clarification is long overdue. Another unresolved point is Beerus, a character who's become less of a benchmark and more of a moving goalpost. Early on, he was presented as the ultimate ceiling for Goku and Vegeta, but as new threats appear, his power level seems to shift, depending on the needs of the plot. Is he still stronger than everyone? Is he a narrative placeholder? His role needs a better definition moving forward. Ultimately, with no word yet on how or when the manga will continue, these lingering threads are starting to weigh heavily on the story. If this panel gives us any update on when the next chapter begins, or even a roadmap for how these issues will be addressed, it could mark a turning point for the entire franchise. While most fans have focused on the manga and anime's content, there's a deeper issue behind the scenes that might be contributing to the recent silence around Dragon Ball Super. And that's the growing legal tension between Shueisha, Toei Animation, and Capsule Corporation Tokyo. This isn't a typical trademark dispute. 2023, Akio Yoku, one of the most influential figures in Dragon Ball's modern history and former head of Shueisha's Dragon Room, left the company to start Capsule Corporation Tokyo. With him, he took the rights to oversee Dragon Ball's animation, gaming, and multimedia projects. Meanwhile, Shueisha retained the rights to the manga publication. Since then, confusion has mounted over who actually has the authority to greenlight and manage major Dragon Ball content. Coordinating between Shueisha, Capsule Corp, and Toei has reportedly become stressful and disorganized, with multiple stakeholders needing to sign off on every move. That's likely why we've seen a slowdown in both communication and production. The situation became even more delicate following the passing of Akira Toriyama. With his estate now involved, the question of who truly steers the franchise has grown more complicated. There's been no public resolution to this internal power struggle. And that uncertainty may be one of the biggest reasons why the future of DBS remains in limbo. Until this behind-the-scenes tension is resolved, announcements regarding the continuation of the manga, a new anime, or even future movies may remain delayed not for lack of material, but because the legal foundation for collaboration is still being figured out. Now that we've looked at the misinformation, the reality behind Toyotaro's appearance, the potential announcements, and the legal situation behind the scenes, it's time to ask the big question. What do I think is going to happen? Realistically, I think the most we'll get from the panel is a general update on the Dragon Ball Super manga maybe. A rough idea of when it'll return or a small tease about what's next for Goku and Vegeta. Toyotaro might share his thoughts on Toriyama's legacy or offer insight into how the manga team plans to carry the torch. It's unlikely we'll get a massive announcement, but we could walk away with a clearer sense of the roadmap ahead. There's also a decent chance we get an update or at least a teaser on a new Dragon Ball movie. Given how much time has passed since Superhero and how profitable these films have been for Toei, a theatrical release in late 2025 or 2026 feels like a logical next step. Concept sketch or vague release window would be enough to spark excitement without locking them into anything concrete. But here's what I hope for. A full-blown continuation of the Dragon Ball Super anime with the Moro and Granola arcs adapted and animated. Fans have waited years for these arcs to be brought to life. Stories are rich, the stakes are high, and characters like Goku, Vegeta, and even Frieza have grown in ways we've never seen before. Seeing those developments animated would reignite the community and push Dragon Ball back into mainstream relevance. Still, if I had to choose between a new movie and the return of the Super anime, I'd personally go with the anime continuation. Dragon Ball's heart has always been in its long-form storytelling, those arcs that build over dozens of episodes, where rivalries deepen, transformations unfold slowly, and battles carry real emotional weight. A movie can be hype, sure, but nothing compares to a full arc brought to life on screen. So while I expect something small, I'm hoping for something big. Something that gives fans real confidence that Dragon Ball still has a clear path forward in a post-Toriyama world. At the end of the day, the confusion surrounding Toyotaro's appearance at the Japan Expo reminds us of just how eager and desperate phones are for concrete news about the future of Dragon Ball. The original mistranslation sparked excitement, panic, and debate across the community. But now that we've clarified what's really happening, it's clear that all eyes are on this panel, not because it promises something huge, but because we've been in the dark for far too long. Between the unresolved storylines in the manga, the ambiguous timeline leading up to the end of Z, the lingering role of characters like Black Frieza and Beerus, and the ongoing legal tensions behind the scenes, it's no wonder fans feel stuck in limbo. We're not just waiting for content, we're waiting for direction. Whether it's a movie, the anime's return, or just confirmation that the manga will resume soon. Any clear step forward would mean the world to a fan base that's been holding its breath since Toriyama's passing. So let's see what this panel brings Maybe it's a small update, maybe it's the spark of something bigger. Either way, we'll be here to break it all down. If you enjoyed this breakdown, or want to stay updated on everything Dragon Ball, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss what comes next. Thanks for watching.